Welcome to this week's study group, week 4. During this week, we are going to focus all our attention on strategy analysis. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, so for this video, I'm experiencing a few technical issues, so I'm not going to expand the slides that I'm sharing, and we'll just take it from here. Wonderful. So let's now delve into this knowledge area, strategy analysis. This is the work that must be performed to collaborate with stakeholders in order to identify a need of strategic or tactical importance, enable the enterprise to address that need, and align the resulting strategy for the change with higher and lower level strategies. So let's have a look at where does this strategy analysis knowledge area fit within the business analysis spectrum, value spectrum? So in terms of where we as business analysts add value on this spectrum, I'd like you to just take note that we've got potential on the left and actual on the right. So potential is the end of the spectrum where we do work around considering potential solutions or potential initiatives that might be undertaken by the business. This is where higher level business needs are being identified, analyzed and explored to decide, do we want to take it forward into initiatives? And then on the actual end is the other extreme, as you might consider it, where we've already gone through the entire life cycle of the various initiatives and we are now live and in operation. So the systems or the solutions that we've implemented are in production on the actual end of the spectrum. So for the purposes of what we're talking about today, we've got strategy analysis being on the potential end. So this is where we really explore the business need from various different aspects, and we look at the current state of the organization. So apart from the current state, we will also look at defining the future state. We'll assess the risks that's involved with doing that. And then we will look at defining the change strategy and the role of the business analyst in that. But for this particular video, let's talk about analyzing the current state. So analyzing the current state, the purpose of this is to understand the reasons why an enterprise needs to change some aspect of how it operates and what would be directly or indirectly affected by this change. Now, if we delve into the elements of this task, it will give us a lot of insight as to what are all the different aspects that we need to look at when we do a current state analysis. So we'll start by looking at business needs and what that really means. Then we'll look at organizational structure and culture, capabilities and processes, technology and infrastructure, policies, business architecture, internal assets, and external influencers. But let's start now with the first element, business needs. So these are the problems and the opportunities that's of strategic importance faced by the enterprise. The definition of the business needs is frequently the most critical step in any business analysis effort, because you don't want to be solving a problem that doesn't really exist or solving only half of a problem, where a solution must meet or satisfy the business need in order to be considered successful. A solution to the business need must be able to deliver a set of benefits for the enterprise or the stakeholders, or help avoid losses that would otherwise occur. So yes, it's very important as a business analyst to make sure that we get to the true business needs before we jump into solving the business need or particular business problems. Now, if we look a bit further into this element around business needs, there are typically 4 different places where we tend to find business needs. The first place that's being defined here is the top-down kind of location, which is effectively when we look at strategic goals that needs to be met or achieved by the organization. Then there is from the bottom up, and this is when there's a problem identified with a process or a function or a system. We also get business needs come from middle management, which is normally around additional requirements for information that they need in order to run their departments well by making good decisions. And then from an external driver perspective, a lot of the time, the customer demand or competition might actually be driving the need for change. And this is often where we would find our business needs are coming from. All right, so then if we delve into the next element, this is around organizational structure and culture. So the organizational structure is the formal relationships in the organization. And these relationships are often influenced by this formal structure. So any relationships within the organization is influenced by this. And it can actually have either a very supportive impact on a potential change, or in some ways it could actually limit the potential change. So it's important for us to understand the organizational structure and try and understand some of the relationships that exist. Then the organizational culture, this is basically all the shared beliefs of the organization, the values that we work against, as well as the norms. And this tends to drive the actions of the organization. So it's really good to understand what the culture is, because this helps us to assess whether changes are required in order to accept the change to the culture. All right. The next element is around capabilities and processes. So this is, in terms of the current state, this is when you need to understand basically what are all those activities that the enterprise perform. And the business analyst can take one of these views when assessing capabilities and processes. And this is the capability-centric view, or you can take a process-centric view. If you take a capability-centric view, this is basically when you look at the enterprise in terms of innovative solutions that combine existing capabilities to produce a new outcome. Whereas if you look at a process-centric view of the enterprise, is when you look for ways to improve the performance of any current activities. So these are the two different views that tends to be driving some of the assessments of capabilities and processes. All right, so then element 4, this is where you need to understand basically what is the technologies that we're looking at and what infrastructure exists within the current state. So information systems that are used by the enterprise, then that supports people in executing processes, making decisions and interactions with suppliers and customers. So if you're looking at a particular domain to change, like for example, the finance department is looking for a new accounting solution because they believe that they've got real needs within that area, you will go and look at what are the systems that's currently in place. Then infrastructure would be looking at what hardware is in place. So what kind of server setups exist? Is there any machines involved, any plant machines? If it's a factory, you really need to understand what is the landscape in terms of your physical infrastructure. And then policies. We are all quite familiar with this concept, where policies are basically defining the scope of decision making at different levels of the enterprise. An example that I came up with is a policy that we all love, and that is if you can find a company that's got a policy to allow an employee to take their birthday off as an extra annual leave day every year, then that's a pretty good policy from an employee's perspective. So that's just one fun policy, but there may be other policies around working from home, or policies around how customers and when customers has to be refunded for certain products. So their policies are basically those rules that you follow to help with decision making. Okay, so the sixth element around analyze current state is business architecture. So this consideration is about understanding the bigger picture and the context of the enterprise, business unit or stakeholder group before finalizing the proposed change to the current state. So it's important for you to take a bit of a bird's eye view and have a look at the bigger picture and the holistic context where you are planning to make a change. All right, so element 7 is around assessing the internal assets. Now, with internal assets, we're referring to some of those tangible and intangible assets, such as financial resources or patents, the reputation of the organization, or any brand names that the organization possess. These should be considered in the context of the current state when performing your analysis. I've got a good example of where this was a very important factor when I was part of a prepaid Visa reloadable gift card project a few years ago. And the brand of the company that I was working with was very, very strong in the market, and the general public really trusted this brand. However, they were not a financial institution, but they were looking for ways to increase their business. So they really banked on the fact that they had such a strong brand and such a good reputation of being a trusted brand when they launched this particular prepaid Visa card into the market. And that really worked for them. And if they didn't use that particular intangible asset or identified that they had that internal asset within their current state, then they may not have had that opportunity. So it's really quite an interesting one to keep in mind. And then the final element for analyze current state is about external influencers. So these are external factors to the enterprise that could introduce constraints, dependencies, or drivers on the current state. So sources of external influences could be industry structure. Like we said before, competitors could be a driver for change. Customers could also be a driver for change. Suppliers, political or regulatory environment could be basically forcing the organization to make certain changes. Technology could be driving the change, as well as any macroeconomic factors. Okay, so the next slide is then really just to conclude this first task. So it's over to you, as we always do. Remember to raise your questions about this task. It's a really important task for strategy analysis, and everybody would at some point in your business analysis role perform some of these tasks. And it's really good, even just from an awareness perspective, if you don't do a lot of formal current state analysis work, it's a good reference to keep in mind when you work on smaller projects. And then think of any examples that you might have of doing this work, and examples just like what I've just given. Let's share it in the group to give people more practical examples to refer to and to further understand. And of course, as always, if you can think of something that would be a good idea for people to take extra note of for the exam, please share that with us as well. Okay, wonderful. So thank you very much. I look forward to sharing the next part of strategy analysis with you in the next video. Welcome to this week's study group, week 4. During this week, we are going to focus all our attention on strategy analysis. Let me share my screen with you. Okay,